All right, everyone, welcome into episode 144 here of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, the only sports podcast to talk about both American and Brazilian sports. I'm Nick Hill, back with my Neyland Stadium background at the checkerboards. And in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil is Gus Tomazeli. And guess we have made it. College football is so back.
Yeah, literally with already upset and a last minute field goal, with all the things that we love about that sport. Here, always with my real Bronco Stadium background because I'm always Tigre, always champion. And that's definitely talk about a lot of football since, and it's so funny, you talk about how, football is such a fall sports and with all the crispy, kind of, you know, coldish time. And today it really feels like fall, at least here in Brazil, because it's very cold right now. It's 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which for me, it's cold.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's the exact opposite. Because in Tennessee, we've suffered a false fall. Because last week was actually relatively nice, mid 80s, low humidity. But this week is going to be 100 degrees on Wednesday. And for a 12:45 kickoff on Saturday, we are looking at low to mid 90s in Knoxville. It's going to be very hot. I don't miss being in the Pride in games like this one. I'll be enjoying this one from the comfort of air conditioning.
Uh, you're not attending your alma mater versus the university of your hometown, the Nick Hill
Now, at
Bowl.
least I'm not planning on it. Now, I might change my mind last minute, but I don't know. I just in a game like this, not no disrespect to the Mocs, and obviously it's just we'll talk about much more about this game in a little bit, but this should be a game that should be over by halftime, right? Like, I just it's just not the kind of game that I really want to sit out at noon on an August day to watch.
Yeah, that's fair. I get it. I totally get your point. It's just this is what I call the Nick Hill Bowl. I'm gonna call that the Nick Hill Bowl.
It is the Nick Hill Bowl. It's if absolute disaster happens and the Mocs win, I'm not. This will be the last episode of this podcast because I will be going into hiding if the Mocs somehow pulled it off.
I,
Because
I, I mean, at least you won't be as sad as you were when the Vols lost their season opener in 2019. Let's say that
it
you
would
won't
be
be.
worse. I mean, it like legit because here's the thing about Chattanooga, Tennessee, right? It's not just Tennessee fans, right? You have a lot of Georgia fans here. You have a lot of Alabama fans here. Lots of fans of other teams. I mean, Tennessee lives the life of Tennessee fans. If the Mocs beat Tennessee, would be absolute hell on earth. I mean, because here's the thing: the Mocs have actually beaten Tennessee before in 1958. If you look back at what happened that day, the Mocs won 14-6. Tennessee only had 2 wins heading into that game. I mean, the Vols were bad that year. I believe Bowden Wyatt was the head coach. Literally, the Mocs rushed the field. Fans from Chattanooga rushed the field and took the goalpost back to Chattanooga. And then subsequently, Tennessee fans rioted all across Knoxville, which resulted in Knoxville PD tear gassing them. And then the Hamilton County Sheriff at the time came out and called the Knoxville police a bunch of goons. And then the Knoxville PD blamed the Hamilton County Sheriff for the riot happening in the first place. So the sheriff sued the city of Knoxville.
Whoa! I mean, talk about a game with a lot of outside implications. Wow! I think that wouldn't definitely would not happen today.
Well, no. Well, I will say this: Hamilton County Mayor Weston Wampin, Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs, aka Kane, um, apparently have made a bet over this game in terms of basically if the Mocs cover the 42-point spread, because basically they have put this game at a 42-point spread. I don't know what the actual Vegas line is. If the Vols win by more than 42, then Mayor Wamp has to send Kane moon pies, and a commemorative Coke. Because in Chattanooga, we were one of the first cities that bottled Coca Cola. Because Coca Cola wasn't created in Chattanooga, but the bottle that Coca Cola goes into was actually created in Chattanooga. Meanwhile, if the Mocs lose by less than 42, so the Mocs, let's say they only lose by like 35, then Glenn Jacobs has to send Mayor Wamp Mountain Dew, and I forget what else. I forgot what else he has to send them. But anyway, they made like a friendly wager on whether or not the Vols are going to cover 42 points. So it's not like they're wagering the Mocs are going to win this game, because I don't think there's anyone that's really thinking the Mocs are going to win this game. And I guess since we're starting, let's just talk about the Vols Mocs, and we can kind of jump back all over the place because I feel like we're already on Vols Mocs. And of course, it is opening week here in Tennessee, as it is everywhere else, right? And for Tennessee, we're opening up against an FCS team. Now, obviously, as Gus has mentioned, usually for an FCS game, I'd be like, okay, whatever, it's an FCS game. But anytime we play Chattanooga, it is just a little bit more special for me, right? Because, the Mocs are my second favorite college football team. They're my preferred FCS team. And anytime the Mocs are not playing the Vols, I am rooting for Chattanooga. I want Chattanooga to do well. I want them to win in the FCS. And this is like a game where I'm almost basically I want both teams to have fun. But mostly, I really just want both teams to come out of this with no injuries. Because I want Chattanooga to be well positioned to go on a run in the SoCon. Chattanooga is favored to win the Southern Conference this year and make their second straight appearance in the FCS playoffs. If you remember last year, they beat Austin Peay in the first round on a last-second field goal and lost at Furman in the second round. And of course, the Vols are coming off a year where, they kind of took a little bit of a step back from 2022 and had an okay 2023 because they won the Citrus Bowl. We were there. And now we're getting to start the Nico Iamaleava era for real. So, Gus, we're now in this first full season of Nico. A lot of fans are wondering, is this season going to be more like 2022 or is it going to be more like 2023? What are we watching for here in game one?
First of all, I want to see how the fans, goes to this season. How, Tennessee fans, showed up, because I saw how, we end the last season with a good note, winning the Citrus Bowl. Optimistic about what we saw from Nico, but definitely is to see how the offense is gonna, react, or how this team is gonna perform offensively, to see if the high tempo offense is still going to be strong with Nico. So I want to see how much damage Tennessee can put against the Mocs.
True. And you have to remember, too, we played Austin Peay last year in our FCS game. We were only up a touchdown at halftime in that game and only really won that thing by 17. That was not a pretty game at all. It was a very frustrating game to watch. Now, Rusty Wright, I don't anticipate is going to be as crazy as Scotty Walden. Remember, Scotty Walden just was going for fourth downs, calling timeouts, trying to frustrate. Rusty Wright is a more typical button-down coach, and he actually beat Scotty Walden head-to-head last year in Clarksville in the FCS playoffs. Now, when it comes to the Mocs, they have a really good offense. It's headlined by quarterback Chase Artopoulos, and I got to watch him play last year in person. They threw up 50 points in Western Carolina in a 52-50 loss. Was a crazy, crazy game, back and forth. Kind of reminds me of a game that sometimes Josh Heupel seems to have gotten into. Now, obviously, I don't expect him to throw up 50 on Tennessee just because it's a far higher level of competition. There's no one in the SoCon that's like James Pierce, right? They don't have to face any defensive line like that. But don't be surprised if the Mocs get some first downs. Heck, don't be surprised if they score early. The Mocs are a really good team, and I'm excited for them. But at the end of the day, I just think defensively, even though there is definitely talent there for Chattanooga, there's no reason for Nico, this revamped wide receiving core, our talented backfield, having one of the best offensive lines in the country, anchored by arguably the best center in the country in Cooper Mays. There's no reason for the Vols to struggle in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. I think the Vols should take care of business. Hopefully, better than the last time they faced an FCS team. Um, uh, we expect at least to be at least 2.5 to 3 touchdown lead by halftime. And again, I think the fans want to see how the offense performs because I think defensively Tennessee can handle this game, but I want to see how much damage they're gonna put up against Chattanooga. I remember
Yeah,
I believe the last time they played Iowa in Inland State, I believe was 2019.
right.
The
And I
Jeremy
was
Pruitt
sick that
era.
game, so I actually did not go to that game. I was
I
actually sick and watched that one from home.
I was at that game. First of all, I was very, very frustrated with at the time the Mox head coach because for some reason he did not kick a field goal in an entire game when the Brazilian kicker João Victor Humo was on the roster. And I was at the game, of course, covered for WTK Rocksol Sports. All the attention was on the balls, but definitely I want to see my fellow Brazilians score in Milan Stadium. But I was disappointed because it was a 40, I believe it was 43-0 or something like that. But there were so many times the Mocs could have kicked a field goal in that game, and they didn't for some reason. And I even talked to João Vitor after the game, and he was very frustrated that he was like, was excited to be in Milan Stadium playing a very prestigious college football team, and he did not have a chance to kick a field goal. That's one thing I remember from that game, and definitely, we can't compare that team with this team. A lot of change, especially the command, the head coaching part. But
Right, because you got to remember, heading into that game, we were coming off the losses to Georgia State and BYU.
yeah, we were 0-2. So I remember a lot of fans that went to that game were very skeptical and very um, weird feeling about it. Of course, Pruitt praised that win, but was a, was mandatory win. I mean, I think if Pruitt would have lost that game, he would have definitely would be fired. Oh and
No,
3
no,
losing.
he would have been fired immediately.
Yeah,
I mean, you think of the back of that game. I mean, only 86,000 people showed up to that game.
yeah. I remember the stadium was not with the atmosphere that they were against BYU, but
Yeah,
definitely I bet the Vols gonna cover the spread. It's gonna be 56-10.
I think it's going to be something like 55-17. Again, I think the Mucks will have some success, especially for the air. I've got to remember, too, we have a new look secondary. I'm very keen to see what they look like. I expect them to make some mistakes, but I hope to see that the athleticism will be something that will allow that secondary to improve a lot from the previous iterations of that secondary as well. But yeah, I mean, I expect this to be a runaway blowout. But again, I'm rooting for both teams to get out of this healthy, and then the Vols can go 16-0, the Mocs can go 15-1, and all will be right with the world when both are national champions at the end of the year.
So let me ask a question that I always thought about. Of course, for Tennessee, this win does not change anything in terms of rankings. But if Chattanooga wins Tennessee, did they change anything from their rankings?
Oh god, I mean Chattanooga would be like in the top five of FCS if they won. I mean Chattanooga would arguably Tennessee or Chattanooga would have an argument for like number one, right? Because like they'd be up there right behind South Dakota State, North Dakota State. Of course, North Dakota State has a huge opportunity this Thursday. I want to get into that game in a little bit, but Chattanooga would be like top 10 easy if they won. Now, Chattanooga is not on the level of a North Dakota State, South Dakota State. I mean, the SoCon in general is just not. But they are, I would decently say, and I need to look this up exactly where the Mocs are in the Mocs are ranked number 9th preseason. So right now they are a top 10 team. And like
Yeah,
literally
they're number 8. They're number 8 team in the country, and they are the best SoCon ranking team.
exactly. I mean, this should be the best Chattanooga team in a decade. Because the last time Chattanooga truly had an outside national title shot was like 2014. when they had Jacob Huseman, and they played Tennessee that year, and they didn't, and they lost by like 30. So, and Tennessee back then was not nearly as good as they are now. So I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's no disrespect to the Mocs at all. I think the Mocs are going to be awesome this year. I'm going to have a lot of fun. I plan to go into at least a game or two. Um, but I mean, look, Nico, the Vols are just wait. The way that Heupel has built this team, I mean, it's just there's no real comparison. But at least the thing that Mocs fans can take solace in is that these games help keep the Mocs football program around. I mean, because I believe they're getting $1.7 million to play this game. So, I mean, these games are necessary, and even though it's not I'll be honest, it's not fun for me to root against the Mocs at all. But if you would ask, kind of like a warm up practice game for both, is the way I'm going to see this one.
And a lot of pundits like to kicked on these games, calling this kind of games cupcake games, compare calling this like a Panera bread games. Um,
Right,
call, calling Cowherd loves to talk about Alabama playing against Panera bread. But as you said, it's necessary to keep, I think, ecosystem that has an entire um, uh, world of college football alive. Because as you said, Chattanooga is going to get $1.7 million to play this game, and this money definitely keep the program afloat. South Dakota State also is going to get some money to play against Oklahoma State. Akon. Akron to play Ohio State, UT Martin to play Kansas State, and so on. You know, it's
right. Of course, Oklahoma State's stupid for playing South Dakota State. I don't know why they would play that. I mean, South Dakota State is the back-to-back reigning national champion in FCS. Oklahoma State very well might lose that game, but we'll get in that in a bit. But as you said, I mean, there's going to be some fascinating FCS versus FBS games, and I want to put a pin in that and come back to it a bit later in the pod when we get into this week's games. But I do want to address games that have happened because the season actually has kicked off. It kicked off in Dublin over the weekend, and Florida State Seminoles were at the center of the college football world. Because remember, if you go back to the end of last year, they were 13-0, had done everything that they needed to do, won the ACC. They had lost their quarterback to an injury, but they were undefeated. They should have gotten a playoff spot, right? Nope. The playoff committee chose Alabama over them. Florida State kind of imploded as a program, and they lost by 60 to Georgia. And they've been suing everyone on the entire offseason, suing the ACC to get out, suing ESPN. Every time during college game day, Kirk Herbstreit spoke, Florida State fans are trying to boo him and drown him out every single time. It's been nuts. But they had a chance to right the ship and win on Saturday against a conference opponent, and they couldn't do it. Georgia Tech put off the last-second win, 24-21. And, man, this Florida State feels like a program that, as our good friend Jason Wire likes to say, is a Potemkin village, a PVU. Basically, the facade of a powerhouse, but they really are not. And I think Florida State has some serious, serious cultural program issues.
because they were in a pickle, because it's like they are definitely not over last year. Everything that happened after that December 4th Saturday night ended up, kind of, being a distraction. This program has been under distraction since the end of, the ACC championship game on December 2nd. So, and I think this year is going to be a rebuilding year. Definitely, I don't think the Florida State is going to be in the playoffs, but I don't see them going like a 5-7. I think at least they're going to be like a 7-6.
Well, my question is for Mike Norvell, why don't you have any good quarterback options 4 years into your tenure? Why did you go out and get a guy in DJ Ukulele who was mediocre at Clemson and mediocre at Oregon State. Like, we know what he is. And the idea that he was just going to all of a sudden be amazing at Florida State, I mean, this dude could barely complete any passes downfield. He was 19 to 27, but all of them were basically at or behind the line of scrimmage. He reminded me a lot of Joe Milton to an extent, but Joe Milton, even now and then, could complete some passes downfield. He's a less athletic version of Joe Milton, which means he can't basically do anything. And at Florida State, from just offensively, they don't have any explosive playmakers at the skill positions. Defensively, they look like they've taken a step back. There's no Jared Verses on that side of the ball. I mean, they were just pushed around. Georgia Tech ran for almost 200 yards in this game. That shouldn't happen to a team with a talent advantage like Florida State. But Georgia Tech got schemed them. Haynes King and Justice Haynes just completely ran it down their throats. And you got to give huge credit to Georgia Tech for that. And for Florida State, I just you have to wonder, because you have to remember Florida State. You know, when you look back at their roster last year, a lot of it was heavy transfer portal guys, and they're trying to do the same thing again. I saw they had like 40 guys from the portal on the team this year. You have to, and I think we're starting to see this more and more and more. Some of these teams trying to go all in on the transfer portal and not just waiting to build up through high school recruiting. That has its backside. That can backfire on you. And if you don't hit on several big transfers, you're going to be mediocre. And Florida State right now is mediocre.
Yeah, as you point out perfectly, they definitely don't have a reliable quarterback. It's so funny how DJ Ugalele is going to end his college career and going to be considered one of the most disappointing college football quarterbacks, I believe, because he had so many opportunities to show that he was a good quarterback, and he time and time again proved that he's not good enough at Clemson, at Oregon State, and now at Florida State.
Right. And it's just insane that for a team that's supposed to have high level caliber, because when you think of Florida State, you think they're supposed to have elite playmakers, and they just don't. If I was a Florida State fan, I would be upset. I would be angry. I would be demanding answers for this. I've been demanding answers on Mike Norvell of this, because it feels like ever since December 4th, he's lost the program. Like, you couldn't mentally get over that, so you lost by 60 to Georgia, and then come out and lay an egg against Georgia Tech. I mean, their next game, too, is going to be in front of a national audience Labor Day night against Boston College at home. And Boston College has a chance to be sneaky good. I mean, what are the odds to start off 0-2? And think about this. They're going to be home for that game. The moment they start struggling, don't you think those fans are going to start turning against the team? I mean, what are the odds that, you get Booze and Doak Campbell next Monday night?
Yeah, it's going to be, the fans are going to be a little bit, with a sour taste going to that game, definitely. Because as you point out, they're not over last year, and they are with high expectations, and at the same time, probably not enough talent like last year.
Right. And you're looking at the schedule. I mean, there are several games in there they could lose for sure. I mean, Clemson, Miami, Memphis in a few weeks is going to be tough. They go to Notre Dame. That's going to be difficult. Heck, Florida, right? I would bet my bottom dollar right now that Florida is going to be a more talented team. So, absolutely. Florida State, if I had to guess right now, I still think they probably beat Boston College. I still think they beat Memphis. I still think they beat Cal. SMU, I want to get to in a second because I was alarmed at what I saw with them. Clemson, I think they lose. At Duke, at Miami, I think they lose to Miami. Duke, I haven't seen Duke yet. Obviously, they haven't played. I would probably pick them to win. UNC and Notre Dame, I think they definitely lose to Notre Dame. They might lose to North Carolina. They may lose to Florida. I mean, I think 7-5 to 8-4 is certainly on the table for Florida State this season.
Yeah, as I pointed out, I think the Seminoles I don't see them going to the playoffs, but I also at least they can go uh 6-6 or at least 7-5 because there are some at least winnable games. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go 6-6 or even 7-5 and not make a bowl game. But because I said they're on a rebuilding year.
Yeah, and missing a bowl game would be an unacceptable failure. On the other side, what could Georgia Tech, achieve? I mean, because I would say preseason, a lot of people probably have this team around 7 wins. Could they go above that? I don't know. Like they need to probably show a bit more for the air than they did in this game. Granted, it was raining, and Florida State does have a good secondary. But if they can run that ball like that, they can win some of these games. When you look at their schedule, they got Georgia State, Syracuse, VMI the next 3 weeks. I think those are all games they can win. They go to Louisville, which is very interesting because that was a game they only lost by 5 points last year. But they got the Cardinals off on the right foot. But from there, Duke, UNC, those are two teams they can beat. Then you get Notre Dame at home. Well, I guess technically you get Notre Dame at Mercedes-Benz, if I'm not mistaken, which basically a home game, but like Notre Dame will probably have more fans.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has a huge following, and they definitely can show up to a game like that. But I also think last year, uh, Georgia Tech won the Gasparilla Bowl, so they are on a high, and I think they can go at least 6-6 or even better, 7-5.
Yeah, and this game's huge. They just got a 5-star commit too this past week. And Georgia Tech, don't forget, they're in Atlanta. They're in a recruiting hotbed, and obviously Georgia dominates Georgia, right? Like they're the Bulldogs do. But there's still a lot of good players that Georgia can't sign, you know. And that Georgia Tech really takes football seriously because I think for a while it feels like Georgia Tech hasn't completely been all in on football. Like they're kind of like the Vanderbilt of the ACC to an extent, where they don't fully invest in football like they could. And plus, they had all that time where they were the triple option team.
But the atmosphere at Georgia Tech is way better than Vandy. That Bobby Dodd Stadium is a really beautiful stadium. I've been there many times when I was covering Atlanta United, and I can tell you the atmosphere there is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of nuts because we're seeing a Georgia Tech team being competitive that's not using the triple option. Like it's and that could get you better players. Or
That
not good.
that Let me just real quick shout outs to Vitor Coelho, my fellow Tigre fan, my grandma Emilia watching the pod. But yeah, definitely, yeah, definitely this one is going to give a lot of boost, and it's going to be interesting to see the Battle of Atlanta. The because this game can be considered the Battle of Atlanta. Georgia Tech versus Georgia State, because both of them have their campuses in downtown Atlanta. It's a like a what 5 to 10 mile difference.
I mean, it's less than that. I mean, it should take them 5 minutes to get there, depending on traffic. Like you don't even have to get on
Yes,
the interstate. I mean, you could just take MARTA to get there. So, um, yeah, so that should be interesting. I think Georgia Tech should win. Uh, Now, some other quick Week 0 reactions. Man, New Mexico completely blundered 31-14 lead in the fourth quarter to Montana State, who is ranked fourth in the FCS preseason. Embarrassing loss for the Lobos. I don't think they're going to win a single game this year. You can forget about them in the G5 playoff hunt. Bronco Mendenhall, the new coach, who I didn't realize was a new coach in New Mexico, used to be the coach at Virginia and BYU, has a lot of work to do. And Albuquerque and SMU, a team that I think could compete for the ACC championship in their first year, had to escape Nevada the other day in Reno in a 46-degree game, a rare cold day in August in the desert. They only won 29-24. Um, And Preston Stone just looked awful. Their quarterback, who it was electric last year, great quarterback, just did not look good last week. And I just don't. I don't know how SMU is going to translate because they've got BYU and TCU the next 2 weeks. If they don't look substantially better, they're going to lose one or both of those games, and then they're really going to be reeling heading into ACC play. Their first ACC game is Florida State at home. It's Florida State's reeling right now too. Um, so SMU dark horse ACC pick doesn't look so great right now.
Yeah, they were quite a little trouble, um, but yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah,
interesting to see how they fit in into their new conference.
exactly. And the only other game was Hawaii beating Delaware State by 3 touchdowns. Did see that because that happened in the middle of the night. All right, so we got a final preview here, and it's the Big 12 um, preview. And the Big 12, like every other conference, is a new look conference. We have 18 teams in the Big 12, stretching from Arizona, of course, Arizona State. Of course, you got Utah is now in the Big 12, joining BYU. Colorado is now in the Big 12, joining basically all the teams in Texas. But this is their first year post Texas and Oklahoma. You know, what is the status of the Big 12? Because I feel like they're clearly the third best conference right now, but they're not quite at the SEC Big 10 level.
Yeah, they're going to a new era, definitely with a new environment. Without their two main brands, it's going to be interesting to see how they react because definitely Texas Longhorns and Oklahoma Sooners were the two biggest brands. That's what drove so much revenue and interest in the Big 12 was Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma literally had to carry the Big 12 conference for like an entire decade. Uh, they were probably the only good program with title contention for at least 10 years, I'll say. So but it's a, they have no teams in the top 10, and they only have 5 ranked teams, and they all um below there are none in the top 10. The highest is Utah in rank number 12. So I think uh at least they're going to be in the playoff this year because they have an automatic bid. But I wonder if there's going to be another one. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's going to be really the case there for the Big 12. And I guess you have to ask which teams could be in that conversation. And I don't think it's going to be the team with the most buzz because I mean the team with the most buzz in the Big 12, as it was last year, the Pac-12 is Colorado, right? Because that's the team that everyone's kind of waiting to see can they make any kind of jump from year one to year two under Dion, especially with all the off the field antics, all the off the field controversy, the recent run-ins with the media, the rumors that the team is out of control in the locker room. I just don't know if Colorado's going to improve at all because it feels like they lost a lot from last year, and it still doesn't feel like that team is a team.
Yeah, and they're picking fights with the media. Now the Colorado Athletics Department banning Denver newspaper columnists to ask questions in a press conference, which I think is silly. I think is an overreaction to criticism that the colonists made against Deion Sanders. I know Deion Sanders can be polarizing. He can be quite a character, but he has to be used to of criticism and banning someone to ask questions at a press conference is just silly because if you don't want to answer, just say no comment, or you can answer anything else you want. And you know, you can be asked you can answer a question any way you want. But this kind of thing is kind of makes and it antagonizes your program.
Right, and Deion Sanders seemingly wants that. He seemingly wants to antagonize his program. to everyone, and he just seemed like he does not care, and therefore, a lot of people who are not Colorado fans are going to be rooting against him. Like this Thursday night, there's going to be so many people watching to see if North Dakota State can beat Colorado.
And 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 I think a lot of people will be watching too if Shadur Sanders can be as good as last year, because last year there were talks that he was going to be considered being drafted in the first round of this year's draft, and he didn't declare to the draft, so he is probably going to be in the top 5 quarterback conversation coming to this season. Uh, the question is, can he maintain the hype?
Well, I don't even think it's necessarily up to him, right? Because Shador Sanders is a good quarterback. He is a very good quarterback. I mean, Travis Hunter is the best player in college football. I really do believe that. There's no other player in college football that can do what Travis Hunter does. I mean, that's just facts. But those two can be the two best players in college football, and Colorado not be a bowl team, because what are 3 through 85 like? And I just don't think Colorado has the depth at positions 3 through 85 to compete with the rest of the Big 12. Two players cannot win a championship. It's just impossible. This isn't basketball. Like college basketball, Shador and Travis Hunter could carry Colorado. But this is not basketball.
Yeah.
And I think they lost so much talent, like Dylan Edwards, for example, was their best running back last year. And of course, Colorado refuses to run the ball anyway. But when they did, Dylan Edwards was really good at it. He's at Kansas State now, a Big 12 foe. It will be really good for them. Of course, he had the whole thing with Imani McLean, the cornerback who's just been in trouble everywhere. He's now at Florida. And just so many other players that are just been troublemakers, have transferred. I mean, it's just not a good thing. Now, they have gotten some big talent, like Jordan Seaton, the 5-star offensive lineman who chose Colorado over Tennessee and Ohio State. Seems to be a bit of a head case, let's just be honest. Kind of glad he didn't come to Knoxville, keep the drama away. But when I look at the schedule, like I think they're going to lose Thursday. I'm just going to come out and say I think they lose to NDSU. And I think the wheels could come off that bus real fast.
Because of course the way the season started last year was a Cinderella story, going undefeated, having a top 10 matchup against Oregon, and then everything fell apart, and then they didn't even make a bowl game. But the year before that, they did not. I think it was like 0-12 or 1-11. So at least when Deion Sanders showed up, the program was in disarray. But if he at least doesn't make a bowl game by year 2 with Shadur Sanders, Trevor Hunter, people will be asking questions about him. And the big question is Deion Sanders going to stay in Colorado after his son leaves? Because I remember when he was at Jackson State, his son was with him too. Then both left together for Colorado State. And when Shadur Sanders goes to the NFL, is Deion Sanders going to be engaged enough to keep coaching at the Buffaloes?
The short answer is no. He's gone after this year. I mean, he literally won't do high school recruiting, Gus. He had 6 high school recruits last year. He has none this year. Like they don't care about high school recruiting.
Yeah, he is the opposite of he's the opposite of oh my god he's the opposite of Clemson head coach of using the transfer portal.
Dabo Swinney.
Dabo Swinney. He's the opposite of Dabo Swinney. He heavily uses the transfer portal and not recruit at all.
Right, and you have to have a balance. You got to be like Heupel. Heupel prioritizes high school recruiting, but will use the transfer portal as necessary. Right? All great coaches have to use the transfer portal, but you can't build a program on the transfer portal. You plug holes with the transfer portal, and it's just not going to work with Colorado. I'm sorry, it just is not going to work. Um, but at least in the Big 12, there are a bunch of other teams where it is working in terms of like team building. And I think, in terms of teams that could be competitive, right? Without Texas and Oklahoma, of course, you look at the newcomer in Utah. Utah has won several Pac 12 championships. They should have a healthy Cam Rising back this year. Kyle Whittingham always has a really good defense. I think that's one team to watch out for. And I think their physical style of play should really position them well in the Big 12, a conference that's not known for having, a lot of physical teams. I think additionally, Kansas State is a team that when you look at what Chris Kleiman has done at head coach, super, super consistent, super talented. Best coach Kansas State has had outside of Bill Snyder. And I think they have a really good quarterback. I think they've upgraded a quarterback this year because Will Howard left Kansas State to go to Ohio State. Avery Johnson, I think, is a super talented young quarterback who's really going to elevate that team. And as I mentioned earlier, Dylan Edwards from Colorado is now on K-State, and I think he is going to absolutely shine. I don't know if he's going to have quite a 2022 Deuce Bond season for the Wildcats, but certainly watch out for them. Arizona coming out of the Pac-12, of course, they had a huge season last year, but they lost Jed Fish to Washington. But they basically got all of their players back, including Trevion McMillan, who arguably is the best wide receiver in the country. Now, there's Oklahoma State as well, right? Oklahoma State's ranked. However, I'm not so high on Oklahoma State because they have had a lot of off the field drama. Of course, Ollie Gordon getting arrested for a DUI, and then Mike Gundy coming out and defending it haphazardly, saying like, "Oh, I also have drunken and driving 1,000 times," which was super weird. And it always feels like with Oklahoma State, they're always good, but it feels like because of Mike Gundy, because of the fact he's kind of a character, that he's never going to win anything.
Yeah, he's still riding off of the 2011 season where he came really close of going to the BCS championship game, but it seems like he's losing. He's not as good as he was on the past. One coach I'm really interesting to see that year is the Kansas Jayhawk football head coach Les Leopold, because he's been doing good, but he's not like, he's good, but people are really, like hoping that he can be better. I think he can, you know,
I mean,
um,
he's been as good as you could expect to Kansas. Kansas did nothing before Lance Leopold showed up a couple of years ago. And he has been amazing. And Kansas was probably the next team I was going to bring up because I think Jaden Daniels, um, I've seen it not to be confused with the quarterback of the Washington Commanders now, but this Jalen Daniels is the Kansas quarterback. Jaden is the one that's in the NFL. Um, he's super talented. He should be healthy finally because Kansas had to play a lot of last year without him because of injury, but he should be healthy in this season. And they have a very very manageable schedule. Kansas only has one ranked opponent on their schedule, and that's their arch rival Kansas State Jayhawks on the road. So, but every other team they play is not ranked, and they avoid Utah, they avoid Arizona, and the like.
I mean, if they run the table by that Kansas State game, can they be in the top 10 or at least in a conversation, even be in the top 5 if they run the table?
Well, the only game that I really think is going to be a challenge is at West Virginia. And West
Yeah.
Virginia is another team that, if you look at Garrett Green last year, came out of nowhere, had a very good season. Because you remember heading into last year, Neil Brown was on the hot seat for West Virginia. But they had a really good season, and he's able to keep his job. And for West Virginia, that's a game. They have one of the biggest games this week in Morgantown with Penn State coming to town. So that's a chance for West Virginia. If they pull off that upset, West Virginia will be ranked 100% by the time that game shows up. Because West Virginia, they have Penn State, and then the week before Kansas, West Virginia has to go to Pittsburgh for the backyard brawl.
Yeah, I think the Mountaineers definitely is kind of the team under the radar that can do some damage in the Big 12. Of
Actually,
course.
that's not the team that I think is completely under the radar. The team that I think is under the radar, UCF, the Golden Knights. Um, they have obviously they have had Gus Malzahn, but they brought in KJ Jefferson from Arkansas. And KJ Jefferson, remember, up until last year, was really, really good for the Razorbacks. Strong physical quarterback, big arm, can run, kind of like I don't want to say a poor man's Cam Newton, but probably a Walmart Cam Newton. But he's super talented. And for UCF, their big opportunity to me is that October 5th game at Florida. Because we've heard for a long time about how, like, oh, is UCF really the better program at Florida over the Gators? Well, they're going to have a chance to go to the swamp to try to prove it.
Yeah, yeah. I think they this season. I think UCF wants to prove they are a legit program because they had that magical 2017 season, but at the end of the day, they are not the national championships, even though they want to claim to. But this season, if they play their cards right, they can play for the playoffs because if somehow they can win the Big 12, I don't know, they can be there. So what's great about the Big 12, I think that's the conference with the most open chances. Like you don't have a one really strong team that you're gonna know for sure it's gonna be at the conference championship. Like
Like,
there's
I think
no
there's more teams that could win it than can't win it.
like eh, le- because if you look at all the conference, I mean the teams that I don't think like for sure they're not gonna make it. Arizona State.
Yep,
uh,
Arizona State's the worst team in the Big 12. That is a good pick.
I mean Cincinnati. I don't see it.
They have a
Colorado.
while to go. BYU has a lot of rebuilding they've got to do, and now it's going to be a lot harder for BYU because Utah is now in the in the Big 12 too. So you got the Holy War that's back, which is going to be Texas A&M is obviously the rivalry that everyone's excited to see back this year. BYU Utah is also back this year, which that will be fun.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, I TCU is a program that I hope it goes back because they don't seem to ever recover it from that national championship blowout. They
I mean, they just lost a lot last year. I think they will be back. But the thing for TCU is they got to win at least one. So they have a free game stretch where they host UCF at SMU at Kansas. They got to win at least one of those, right?
oh
They probably got to
yeah,
win at least two of those.
no, yeah, definitely. It's kind of, especially their opener is not easy. It's at Stanford. They have to go to California, and also they're gonna have to go to to Dallas and Lawrence and Utah and Baylor. So they're
You know what's sad is I had to think briefly. Is Stanford a conference game now? But no, it is not a conference game now. However, they do have two games on the road in the ACC. But the one team they play from a state that actually borders the Atlantic Ocean is an interconference game.
yeah, and also they're gonna have a rivalry game because SMU and TCU are rivals because they're literally on the same metro area.
Yep, it's the battle for the Iron Skillet. I mean, that game is going to be huge for both teams. Whoever loses that game could be in for a really rough year.
Yeah.
So, trying to think who else in the Big 12 as I think mentioned. Of course, Iowa State. Matt Campbell, can he ever recapture 2019 2020 when he had Brock Purdy and when he had um, David Montgomery? Because Iowa State, for a time, there was a top 10 team, and then they just completely fell off the earth, and now they're just irrelevant again, like Iowa State normally is.
Yeah, of course. the game they definitely needed to win is on week 2 against Iowa, which is a game everybody's going to be watching because those Iowa and Iowa State games seems always to be interesting.
Oh yeah, first 1 to 2 points wins.
Yeah.
But sorry to
Whoever
the
scores first wins.
yeah. Hey, we love Iowa. Iowa produces all our corn. Um,
Yeah.
and then Baylor. Baylor used to say it seems like every year we're talking about, oh, is this year Baylor could jump into the national title conversation? But Baylor just feels like an afterthought too now. And then like, how, will has Baylor's best days passed them?
Kinda. I mean, didn't they had some troubles off the field and they're kind of getting back to it. So
Yeah, I mean, all those was like mid 2010s, and then Matt Rule came back and saved them. But like Dave Arianda, and they were 3-9 last year, and it was just they were terrible. And Dave Arianda at first was awesome. I mean, they were, I believe in his first year they went to a New Year's Six bowl, if I remember correctly, in 2021. They won
yeah,
the Sugar Bowl.
I think against Georgia.
Yeah, though they beat Ole Miss, and then they lost. Yeah, 2019 they lost to Georgia, but ever since then it's just the recruiting hasn't been there. They haven't used the transfer portal right. The NIL for Baylor hasn't worked, and it's funny because you look at the basketball. Basketball for Baylor has been great. I mean, they won a national title back during COVID, but it just hasn't worked out for them on the football field. Um, Texas Tech too. Texas Tech was a team last year that I thought was going to be a sneaky contender for the Big 12 title, and they just couldn't get it going. They lost to Wyoming in Week 1, and they never recovered. Um, be curious to see if maybe this is the year where they actually take that step back. But Texas Tech, frankly, has never recovered from firing Mike Leach for no reason.
No, they haven't. And it's the kind of thing that set the program back, quite a bit. And I don't see them uh being a contender. I don't think they're gonna be awful, but they're gonna be a 6-6 kind of program.
Like really, every Big 12 Texas team this year has no expectations. Like Houston. I mean, Houston had a few years ago. A few years ago was a team where like, oh, that was an exciting team to watch. Not right now.
Yeah. The last time they were good, it was in 2015 with Tom Herman.
Yep. So
But they had even a shot at going to college football playoffs. By the end, I think they lost some games, and that season made Tom Herman, a really kind of hot coach, and he went to Texas, and everybody was all excited about him. But I'm sad it didn't work out, and that's not the case anymore for Houston.
absolutely, and I'll be curious to see though without Texas, without Oklahoma, what happens. Like Texas high school recruits, like will any 5-star Texas recruits go to the Big 12 anymore? When I felt like a lot of them used to. Um, that's going to be certainly the storyline there. So, I guess real quick, Big 12, your title game pick. Who do you think wins this conference?
Oh, that's a hard question, but I'm gonna go the conference. Uh, there's no. I think there were never uh, divisions, right? The two best goes to Dallas.
Correct. The only conference that still has divisions is the Sun Belt.
So I see Utah versus Kansas State, and then Utah wins.
I'm going to go a little bit off the kilter. I think it's going to be Kansas State versus UCF. I am a huge believer in the Knights this year, not just because of KJ Jefferson, but RJ Harvey. Excellent running back, one of the most underrated running backs in the entire country. And they have 2 or 3 running backs behind them that are just as good. I think UCF's going to run wild. Gus Malzahn, remember when he was at Auburn, just had random years where they were really good. And this feels like this could be that year for UCF where they're just randomly really good. I think they can beat Florida in week 4 and really propel that momentum forward. And actually, give me UCF to pull off the upset in the Big 12 title game. And the
And
Golden
they
Knights
so
finally
they
get a shot at the playoffs.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, so in your predictions, finally, the University of Central Florida is gonna have a chance to prove they can fight for a national title.
Correct. That is my prediction. UCF. And I think I could see in a sad scenario like Kansas State still getting a shot to make an at-large. But I think this is going to require some big-time wins. Like, for example, the Big 12 needs West Virginia to win this week over Penn State. They need UCF to beat Florida. They need Colorado to beat Nebraska. They need Iowa State to beat Iowa. They really need some of these big non-conference wins. Of course, Oklahoma State gets Arkansas in week 2. TCU to beat SMU. As a collective, it's kind of like what we see in college basketball. They need a lot of good non-conference wins to prove that the Big 12 is deserving of a second spot. But Kansas State will be up there. I think Utah will be in the running. And outside of that, I don't really know because Kansas, is a team, when you look at their schedule, they certainly have a shot. But I don't know if I believe in the consistency. Oklahoma State, talent-wise, might be the most talented roster in the Big 12, but I just don't believe in them culturally. Definitely not Colorado. I don't think Colorado has a depth at all, even though they probably have the best player in the Big 12 in Travis Hunter. But at the end of the day, that is what it is. So that's kind
Yeah.
of what I see.
At the end of the day, football is a multiplayer sport, not a one-player sport.
So when I look at my top 4 in the playoffs, so I picked Georgia. I think I did Texas over Missouri. So I have Texas. I have Ohio State over Oregon. I had Miami over Florida State, which I don't love that prediction anymore. If I had to change that, I probably would change that to like NC State or even Georgia Tech, or one of those two. But I think Miami right now is still the best team in the ACC. And then UCF. So I'm going with 2 Florida teams, and not one of them being Florida State and Florida in the playoff. Now, of course, you look at some of the non-con teams. I think when outside of those 4, right, that I just picked, looking across the board, I think outside of that, I think like Georgia, Alabama from the SEC for sure. I think Tennessee, Ole Miss, Missouri will be on the battling for the SEC as well. So I think you have 4 to 5 teams in the SEC fighting. Big Ten, I think definitely Oregon's fighting. I don't believe in Michigan fighting. So I'd say Oregon and maybe Penn State. But I think there'll be way more SEC teams fighting than Big Ten teams. ACC, I'm not convinced any other team in the ACC is going to be fighting. I think you might have 2 more. 2 to 3 teams fighting in the Big 12. So if I had to guess, I think it's going to basically come down to this. You're going to actually have 1 from each conference in terms of conference champions. And then you have basically 7 open at-large spots, right? So I think out of those 4, you're basically going to get 4 to the SEC. I think you get 2 to the Big Ten. And you get 1 to the Big 12. I think the ACC gets left dry. They only get 1 team in. So if you want to be in the SEC, you got to be one of the best 4 teams.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, and you want to prove that you're a relevant conference too, because I think the Big 12 is on the clock. Because with Pac-12 dying, now they are the next conference to be on a lookout, of course. And I don't think
I think the ACC is a worse spot personally.
Yeah, that's a good point. But the ACC still have their big brand programs. I know it's because of a contract, but they still have it. Big 12 doesn't anymore. They don't have Texas and Oklahoma. So
True.
they this season need more big wins than the ACC to prove they're relevant. Of course, in the long run, I think the ACC has more things to worry about than the Big 12. But right now, the Big 12 is the conference that needs to prove the most they are relevant.
Honestly, the Swamp could be the most important stadium for both conferences. When Miami goes to Florida, that's going to be a huge game for the ACC. When UCF goes to Florida, that's going to be a huge game for the Big 12. Huge game for both conferences. And don't forget Notre Dame. Notre Dame could be good enough to get a spot in their own, and then that takes away in that large spot. And from there, I don't know what conferences gets discriminated against. Um, but real quick, before we get into the Week 1 games, I do just want to briefly touch on G5. I don't want to go into every G5 conference. Just which teams do we think are going to get that spot? What G5 team is going to make the playoffs and has the best chance of being a Cinderella? Because it's going to be interesting to see if any one of these G5 teams can actually go deep. Because I feel like 10, 15 years ago when Boise State first went on the scene, when TCU was back in the G5, Utah was back in the G5, those teams could have competed and actually won some games. I don't know right now if there's truly any G5 teams that are capable of winning a playoff game.
Yeah, of course. The two best programs recently that have been kind of constantly kind of good are Liberty and Tulane. You think about those two.
Yeah, Liberty. Now, I think the thing that's going to work against, Jason Wyrick, surprise appearance from Kansas City, Missouri, as he prepares for Indy 11's biggest game in club history tomorrow. Jason, how are you feeling before the night of a huge, huge match?
Well, we're having a great time here in Kansas City. The game's in Kansas. The airport's in Missouri. The fun is everywhere.
Absolutely. I forget. I forget that the soccer stadium's next to the racetrack.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's correct.
I went to that Children's Mercy Park. It's a really really good environment. Those fans can be loud. So I don't know
Well,
if
we
they're
hope
gonna.
to be louder tomorrow.
Yeah, I wonder if they're gonna show up as they normally do in big MLS games, and also how you're processing. Because this is tomorrow is probably the biggest night in the 11 history.
Oh, no question. And it's the biggest night in the club's history, and we're playing with house money at this point. So we're going to be celebrating whether we win or lose tomorrow. No, we want to win, and we're going to be bitterly disappointed if we don't. However, the fact that we have made it from the USL Championship, second division, all the way to the Final Four of the U.S. Open Cup is just remarkable, and we're all super proud. And the flight here today was good, and the team flew us out here. It was great, and so we're having a great time.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that. Talk about the vibes right now amongst the Brickyard Battalion, because I can only imagine, how this whole segment time is basically just gonna be one big party for y'all.
Absolutely, we're just treating this like we're treating this like any other away day. At the same time, we're happy to be here, but we still want to win. And so we all went and had barbecue today. We've been just kind of exploring Kansas City a little bit. We'll be doing it again tomorrow. But when it's game time, and we're going
Now,
to be loud, proud, and rowdy.
now,
As you know,
How does Casey Barbecue compare to barbecue in the South?
look, it's all barbecue. It's all delicious. Don't make me choose.
That's fair.
That's definitely what matters. Barbecue is good, but obviously I got to go with Jason to the quarterfinal match against Atlanta United, and that was a lot of fun. So definitely I'll be watching to see what Indy 11 can do in the semifinal match tomorrow. But just real quick, just on the match itself, kind of what is the key for Indy 11 to uh, pull off another big win?
Resolute defending. If you can hold a clean sheet, you can win a game. And that's what the rock solid defense was what won against Atlanta. and eventually, you just have to bag your opportunities and then defend really well. And when you can do that, you're going to have a chance. And tomorrow, as long as the defense shows up and goalkeeper Hunter Salt puts on a good performance, there's going to be every opportunity in the world to knock these guys off and continue history. And Gus, we are one win away from qualifying for the CONCACAF Champions League, because LAFC, as long as LAFC wins, which they should against Seattle in their half of the bracket, the winner of this game will get the auto bid from the Open Cup, because LAFC is already qualified through
MLS.
they qualified through whatever other competition. And so we're excited not only for that, for this game, but we could end up in the CONCACAF Champions League from the second division. That's the biggest game in the club's history, and it's not close.
Yeah, the last time probably something like that happened in soccer, I remember in 2004 where Santo André from second division won the Brazilian Cup. So it's kind of like that, I get the feeling because it's kind of, as you point out, if Indy 11 goes into the CONCACAF Champions League, it's huge. Yeah, I don't think soccer fans understand how huge this is. How it's kind of monumental to see your second division team goes to a competition with the top brands in your country, go to the semis, and even have a chance to play internationally.
And it's just been such a good story with
Oh,
all
yeah.
the turmoil off the pitch, that we've talked about throughout this year, and the fact that Indy 11 finds itself in this position is just, I mean, this is a movie we're watching.
Hey, let's give it a movie ending. What you say?
Yes.
I'm excited. I've got our away day banner here to hang up tomorrow. We had a tifo we were gonna do, and then Sporting Kansas City told us we couldn't have it, so we didn't paint it. But it was a great tifo. It was the cover of The Last of Us, like the video game, except it said The Last of USL, and it had our gaffer on it. It was
great.
awesome. So I'll
Now,
send.
I wonder,
I'll send the.
Does that banner go in the overhead, or do you have to check it in your luggage?
So we didn't have any checked luggage on this flight, so this went in the overhead bin in a backpack.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought of that question. That was just a question I had. Yeah, I think it's because I was having this discussion with someone the other day about, like, how do marching bands travel? Because I think it was because of the Florida State Georgia Tech. Like, how do marching bands travel across country? So I don't know. That's just kind of my thought process on that.
Yeah, we're all I know is we're having fun. It's gonna be great tomorrow. We're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna be loud. We got our scarves in that I designed. So I'll lay my phone down here, and you can see it. Oh,
Yeah.
Hopefully, it isn't as hot up there, because I know it's going to be like 100 here tomorrow.
yeah, it was 101 degrees when we landed. It's gonna be hot tomorrow, but I mean, we'll drink water, and well, in my case, I'll drink water. A lot of others will drink other things.
Right.
But
I know you
we're
will
gonna have a great time. I'll be very hydrated.
Yes.
But I'm excited. Everybody's excited. I just ran back to my room to do this real quick. I've been hanging out with everybody else. We've been hanging out at the hotel bar, just being rowdy. So
yeah,
we're in great shape. We're a lot of the guys are rolling deep, and the fun is being had.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've just been sitting here talking college football, man. So I'm sure you'll be joining us.
Hey,
to
give me
talk
Louisville in the
that.
ACC, give me Tennessee in the SEC, and everybody else can go to hell.
Honestly, after this week, I don't see why not Louisville in the ACC, right? Because everyone in the ACC this weekend looked like garbage. So,
Yeah, Louisville's going to look like garbage this week too, but I hope not. But I'm realistic. But thanks for having me on. Sorry to interrupt your discussion, but
No,
Absolutely.
I
We'd love
appreciate
to
you
hear
letting me
it.
crash the pod as always.
you're honored.
Absolutely.
Yes, and let's go Indy.
Let's go.
Vamos,
Let's go
Indy.
Indy.
Vamos.
Absolutely. You have to call if you guys win, because that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I gotta see
absolutely.
that. I gotta see that environment.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I got you. All right. I will
I think it's gonna
wave
be.
to you on TV and we're gonna
I
win.
think the game's gonna be free on Apple TV. I believe.
That sounds right.
What time is it? 7, right?
It'll be 8 or 8:30 your time.
Okay.
I don't remember which.
Yeah. I'll probably
Oh.
watch start of it at the gym. So, but in any case, yeah. All right, man.
All right,
You
boys.
guys stay, have fun, and go get that dub tomorrow. Let's do this.
Absolutely. Take care, boys.
Absolutely. And that was Jason Warwick from Kansas City. You know, it's funny. After that game, I felt like an honorary Hoosier when we went down to Atlanta because, you know, after every goal he's seeing, you know, my old Indiana home, and, you know, I've only been to Indiana a handful of times, but definitely rooting for Indy 11 tomorrow because that
The game's gonna be at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Absolutely. So let's go get it. Beat Sporting KC. Okay, so we were talking about the G5. So you had mentioned, you know, Tulane and Liberty as 2 teams to watch, and those are 2 teams definitely to watch. I think some other teams to watch, in my opinion. I think Memphis has a really talented team, a really talented offense. Ryan Silverfield has done a really good job post Mike Norvell with Memphis, and that's something that I don't really care which G5 team makes it, but the one I don't really want to get is Memphis, because Memphis fans are so obsessed with Tennessee, and they want to say so bad they're the first Tennessee team to make the college football playoff. So I really hope Memphis does not win the American, just because it would be really funny, because Memphis has a really good shot of doing so this year, especially with no SMU, no UCF. There's really no excuse for Memphis anymore, outside of like Tulane, to not win the American Conference. And it would just be funny if they didn't. You look over at the Mountain West, I think that's going to come down to Boise State. Now, the interesting thing about Boise State is, they brought in Malachi Nelson from USC, who is a 5-star quarterback. He's not going to be the starter, which is super fascinating because they are paying Malachi Nelson NIL money to be up there. But he's not going to be the starter. So, Boise State, it's been the one team over the last 15, 20 years that really could have made some noise with this system. And now they're nowhere near where they used to be. Because, like, when they had Kellen Moore, like, they could have won the national championship one of those years. I truly believe that. They were that good around, like, 2007, 2008. But they never got their shot. And now they finally were able to get their shots in an era where Boise State is just not that good. UNLV was really good last year. I think they certainly have a shot. They play Houston this week, only a 1.5 underdog. And I think you look at the American and the Mountain West. Those are the 2 best G5 conferences. I think your G5 champion is going to come out of that, unless like a Liberty goes undefeated. But the problem for UNLV, or the problem for Liberty, is the CUSA stinks. I mean, the second best team in that conference is probably Western Kentucky, but the conference as a whole is just really weak. And arguably, they shouldn't have gotten the Fiesta Bowl spot last year over SMU. And if you remember, Liberty got that spot, even though they were undefeated, and got absolutely destroyed by Oregon. 45-6. They did not belong on the field. And I think the committee is going to remember that this year if Liberty's undefeated again. I don't think they'll get that spot again. And then the MAC, I love me some action. Maybe Western Michigan's the team to watch in that conference. I think they're going to be a pretty solid team. Maybe like a Toledo and Miami of Ohio, Northern Illinois. I just don't think any one of those teams are going to be in a position to contend for that playoff spot, just because I think the MAC's going to eat themselves. So I think, in my honest view, it's going to be whoever has the least amount of losses between Memphis and Tulane in the American, and then Boise State, UNLV, or Wyoming, or maybe Fresno State in the Mountain West. And Fresno State, they open up at Michigan. So the real question is, which one of those teams can pull an upset? Boise State goes to Oregon. Fresno State goes to Michigan. Memphis goes to Florida State in 2 weeks. Tulane has, I forget who Tulane hosts a Power 5 team at home in a few weeks, if I remember correctly. I think it's like, I'm trying to remember who do they host, because they have a pretty big game at home. Well, they go to Oklahoma. So it's going to be real fascinating. Also, in the Sun Belt, Fun Belt, watch for like an Appalachian State. James Madison should be. They have Tulane in back-to-back weeks. They host Kansas State, go to Oklahoma. If Tulane could split those games, they are sitting in really good position to secure that top G5 spot.
So the top contenders, and I also add James Madison, because when they came up from the FCS to FBS, they showed that they deserve to beat that.
Absolutely. And then also, too, I think South Florida has a shot. Remember, South Florida took Alabama to the line. Former Vol OC Alex Golesh has done a phenomenal job, got them to a bowl game last year. They've been recruiting at a very high level for a G5 team. I think South Florida has a shot. They go to Alabama, they host Miami. Here's the thing. I think an 11-1 or even a 10-2 American team should get in over a 12-0 Liberty.
It's funny that UCF, they had a legitimate shot at a national title not long ago in 2007. If they haven't lost to Rutgers, they were ranked number 2 at the time.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know if this UCF team is going to be quite as good, but Alex Golesh, he knows what he's doing. And the thing about Alex Golesh is, there are some people, and I don't think these people are correct, but there are some people who are floating around. Has Josh Heupel fallen off a little bit without Alex Golesh? Now, I think last year was just more of a receivers getting hurt and Joe Milton not being as good as Hendon Hooker situation for Tennessee. But the truth is, Tennessee had their best year with Heupel with Alex Golesh at OC. So, South Florida should be pretty fun to watch, too. But if I had to pick, I would probably have to pick. I have to pick Memphis, I think. And that's the one team I really don't want to see. I'm cool with anyone else out of the G5. I just don't want Memphis.
Yeah, it would be sad to see the first Tennessee team going to the college football playoff not being the Volunteers.
Or could you imagine, though, what if they both make it? What if it's Memphis at Tennessee in the first round?
Oh, my God. It will bring the basketball rivalry into football, because, Memphis and Tennessee hate each other in basketball, especially in the last, 8 years?
Yeah, it would be unreal. The animosity, because at the end of the day, that'd be Memphis' Super Bowl, would be that game. For Tennessee, it would just be a please don't lose.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely Penny Hardaway will be somewhat involving into the preparation, or at least trying to hype up this game, because he hates Tennessee basketball.
He really does. But it's going to be at least cool that the G5 matters for playoff purposes this year. So, in any case, Gus, for the first time this year, let's pick some games. It's week 1. But before we get into the top 5 games of the week, upset alert. Who do we think is on upset alert this week?
Penn State, you're pointing out, they have to go on the road to West Virginia, playing a really good West Virginia team.
I think that's that's going to be a very dangerous game. I'm really curious to see what Drew Allar has. Does he take any step forward for Penn State? Because remember, last year against Ohio State and Michigan, he was awful. And that's a huge reason why Penn State once again failed in their 2 biggest games of the year. So I really do like that pick. Um, Now, my pick, Oklahoma. I think South Dakota State beats Oklahoma State, the number one FCS team, the back-to-back defending national champion, against a program like Oklahoma State, which is just I just don't trust them. I remember last year they lost to South Alabama 33-7 in week 2. And I think South Dakota State's a better football team.
If the Cowboys would lose this game, do you think it's the end of the line for Mike Gundy?
It could certainly I don't know if he'll get fired, but I do
It'll be
think
the beginning of the end.
I would say that. I think it's the beginning of the end because, man, that would be a tough loss to swallow if you're Oklahoma State. Because you think about this, it's not just South Alabama. They lost to Central Michigan a few years ago, too. So
Yeah.
I think also when you look at some other potential upsets, I think South Carolina versus Old Dominion is an interesting game. Old Dominion, notoriously they've beaten Virginia Tech a couple of times. I think South Carolina is in a really bad spot right now as a program. They're starting a true freshman in this game, and Lenora Sellers. That's a game worth keeping an eye on. I think Richmond could beat Virginia. UVA is just a horrible, horrible program. Just horrifically bad. UNLV, Houston, I don't know if that's really that much of an upset, but UNLV could certainly beat Houston there in week 1. So, and yeah, I think those are some of the big ones that I'm seeing that. Oh, yeah, Wyoming over Arizona State. I like that one. Arizona State somehow is a 6.5-point favorite here. I think Wyoming's easily the better team in this game. I would take Wyoming as plus 200 on the money line to win outright. I like the Cowboys in that game. So, and I also have a segment here called Best Bets. For me, when I look at this, I'm not even necessarily I'm not looking at who's going to win or who's going to lose, but I'm looking at who do I think was going to cover. I think one line I really like. So the Texas is favored by 32 against Colorado State. I think Colorado State low key has a really talented offense in this game. I think, I would either go with the Colorado State plus 32 to keep it under a 32-point difference. Now, Texas is going to win this game no matter what, but I think Colorado State can keep this up in the 20s in terms of a spread difference, and I think the total will go over 59.5. I think Texas will score a lot because Colorado State doesn't really have that good of a defense, but I think Colorado State's going to score enough to send that total over.
Yeah. Another interesting game to bet is TCU at Stanford. I think TCU is gonna win by a field goal, so I'm gonna bet. I don't think they're gonna cover the spread.
Okay, so we've got Stanford plus 9.5. I like that pick. I really do. I love the under in that game, I think, too. Florida Atlantic at Michigan State, too. That's a game that I think Michigan State's going for a lot of off-the-field issues. Don't be surprised if FAU keeps that one really close, too.
Yeah, and the second season, that's Tom Herman's second season at the Owls. So I think he wants to prove he deserves to be there because last year they went 4-8.
Absolutely. All right, and then what's our most underrated matchups of the week? I think, Thursday night, a lot of the focus is going to be North Dakota State, Colorado, but don't forget North Carolina at Minnesota. I think, Mac Brown, a lot of people are questioning, should he still be coaching? I think there's people questioning PJ Fleck at Minnesota, because he had that 10-year season back in 2019, hasn't replicated, hasn't come close to that since. I think there's a lot of questions about both of these programs.
Yeah, that's true. Another game I can see is TCU at Stanford. As I said, I think it's going to be a close game, interesting game, and also Virginia Tech at Vanderbilt, because those are two rebuilding programs.
Right, but Virginia Tech, they had a really strong finish of the season last year. There's some people who think they're a dark horse to win the entire ACC. Now, I'm not convinced, but if they are, they should beat Vandy by more than 13 points. But at the same time, I think Vanderbilt, they look at this game as an opportunity where maybe they're thinking internally, if we can't beat Virginia Tech, we've got no chance when Alabama, Texas, Tennessee show up, to Nashville later in the season. So I think for Vandy, you got to kind of put all your chips on the table in that one to kind of prove that, yeah, maybe we are better than what we think. So, I mean, that's going to be just such an interesting game to say the least. Also, I think later on, UCLA going to Hawaii, I think UCLA is going to be horrible in the Big Ten this year, but are they horrible enough to lose on the road at Hawaii? Is the question. Because remember, Vanderbilt was in a very similar situation. I picked Hawaii to win against Vandy, and they got absolutely smoked. And Hawaii only beat a bad Delaware State team by 3 touchdowns the other day. I think UCLA is going to smoke them. Personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's no-brainer.
All right. So now it's time to go into the top 5 games of the week. Starting off with Penn State, West Virginia. Now, you name this game in your episode alert. Who do you think is going to win it?
West Virginia.
I think it's going to be a fantastic game, fantastic environment. But at the end of the day, I just think Nick Singleton's going to be the best player on the field for Penn State. And James Franklin, yes, he loses to Ohio State and Michigan all the time, but he tends to win games like this. I like Penn State to win this game. But if he loses, hot seat city for James Franklin. Because then you have no room for error if you're Penn State. All right. Now, this is a game we've talked about over the past few weeks. Miami and Florida. It feels like whoever loses is on the hot seat.
And you point out that, the Gators schedule kind of has a lot of implications in terms of the battle of the Sunshine State. Who's the better program? Because they're going to face the Hurricanes, then they face the Knights. So I think
they play Seminoles at the end of the year too, like they always do.
Yeah, so kind of the Gators are going to be challenged from South, Central, and North Florida. So the Gators are going to have to play all kind of, sides of the Sunshine State. And I think, they going to have to show some answers because, the Billy Napier is really under the hot seat because he's not been showing so far that he can be kind of the face of a SEC program.
Yeah, it's just so huge because if they lose this one, you can just forget it. I mean, you can really just forget it. I'm gonna be honest though. As much as I really want to pick them to lose this game, I don't trust Mario Cristobal on the road. And I know I just picked Miami to win the ACC. And I think Miami's going to bounce back from this game very well. I think Florida will pull this off, though. I think in the swamp, they're going to go nuts in the swamp. And I think they're going to get a dub.
Yeah, it's a sold-out game. Billy Napier said they're excited about the opportunity. They're familiar with the Hurricanes. He and Mario Cristobal worked together for 4 years in the past, so they had to have a bond, and they are definitely both Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal knows that whoever loses this game is going to be under a lot of pressure.
Very much so. All right, third game here. We got USC and LSU in Las Vegas on Sunday, Which, by the way, I will once again say, like I always have, neutral site games suck. I hate them. There's no reason this game should either be at the LA Coliseum or in Death Valley. But we're playing in Vegas. And it's very interesting because I think both teams, their defenses stink. I think LSU's offense takes a huge step back without Jalen Daniels. But I think USC takes an even bigger step back without Caleb Williams. And as I've said in my Big Ten preview, I think USC is in for a really rough season. And I think it starts here. Give me the Tigers.
I think it's gonna be not a one. It's not gonna be a lopsided game. I think at least USC put up a fight. But in terms, I mean, I think they're gonna cover the spread. I don't think it's gonna be a one touchdown game. I think it's gonna be like a field goal difference. But give me the Tigers.
I'll probably take LSU to cover in this one. I just think LSU's a lot better. And until Lincoln Riley proves they care about defense, can't trust him. All right, the Saturday night game on ABC, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Mike Elko's debut in College Station. Can Mike Elko get a huge win in Game 1?
He kind of has to because he's coming with a lot of excitement after the Jimbo Fisher debacle at the Aggies. But I still think Notre Dame's going to win this game.
Yeah, I think with Riley, because think about this: it's Mike Elko's playing his former quarterback in this game. Riley Leonard used to be at Duke. Now he's going to be the head guy at Notre Dame, and he's playing his old head coach. Super interesting storyline in this game. But I just think Notre Dame right now is a better team. I think Texas A&M is going to take them a year or two to really get rolling under Mike Elko. And I think Mike Elko is going to do really good at Texas A&M. I just think Notre Dame right now is the better team. And they'll find a way to get a really close one. I think this will be a fantastic game. It'll be in the fourth quarter. But the Fighting Irish get a huge win. And for the Fighting Irish, every week they're fighting for their playoff life. So they don't have much room for error. I think, they can't lose more than one game. If they go 10-2, like if Notre Dame loses this game, then they have to beat USC late in the season, who I don't think is going to be very good. And then they get Florida State, who we don't think it's going to be very good either. Like, think about this. If Florida State and USC are both bad, then this is going to be by far the best game Notre Dame plays all season. And in that case, Notre Dame cannot afford to lose this game. Otherwise, 11-1 Notre Dame may not have that impressive a resume compared to a 10-2 or 9-3 SEC team or a Big Ten team.
Yeah, it's kind of win now kind of deal to show there can be a ranked opponent. So definitely there's a lot on the line for the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, they're going to find out real quick that being an independent still in this format is going to be really painful.
That's true. And it's so funny that a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to bitch about it. Like, it's not fair that we have to pick a conference. That's the new reality. Adapt or die.
Yep, they're going to have to adapt. All right, and the game of the week, Georgia versus Clemson in Atlanta. Technically a neutral side, let's be real. This is going to be a Georgia home game. And even though it is the game of the week, I don't think this one's going to be close. I think Georgia's going to roll. I think Clemson is falling off, and this game is going to be a further indication that they're falling off as a program. Georgia is far more talented, and Georgia scares me this year because they got kind of screwed last year. They lost one really tight, close game in the SEC championship. Didn't make the playoff, even though they were probably, in my opinion, I still think they would have beaten Michigan if they played on the field. I really do. Now, Michigan, they won fair and square. I mean, okay, well, outside of like Connor Stallings and all that, they won fair and square. But I do think Georgia was still the best team in the country last year. And they're going to be have to try to prove that this year. And I think they're going to start by steamrolling Clemson. This thing will be over at halftime.
Yeah, that's why I don't think Georgia versus Clemson is the game of the week. I still think Miami and Florida is more relevant to the overall picture of college football than, of course, both are ranked. two really good head coaches. But as you point out, and I agree with you, I think it's going to be a lopsided game. I think the Bulldogs dominated.
True. And I think Clemson too, just as a program, they're kind of a lesser extent of Florida State where they're kind of falling apart. Like I don't know if you saw this, Gus, but Dabo, he's had a call-in show. But they're gonna no longer take calls from fans on the call-in
Only
show.
text. Only
Yeah.
text. I mean, that shows that you're gonna leave soon. That's signs of when your marriage is falling apart and you go sleep on a guest bedroom. That's the kind of sign that the marriage is about to end. That's the kind of thing. Like you're still in the same house, but things are not the same.
Correct. Yeah. So that's it. Week 1 predictions complete. I cannot wait to watch football from sun up to sundown on Saturday. There's going to be a lot of storylines, a lot to react to next week. But we still have another week until the NFL starts. But there is one more week of NFL previews for us to do here, and it's the NFC and AFC West. And let's just get the AFC West out of the way because let's be real. This is the Kansas City division. It's been the Kansas City division now for years. Is there any reason why Kansas City does not win this division this year?
Maybe if the duo Bo Nix and Sean Payton might surprise, but
No, I know.
otherwise no. I'm being I know Denver and the Chargers are both gonna be better than they were last year, but I don't think they're gonna be good enough to challenge KC. I mean, next
I mean,
year,
the duo that interests me is Harbaugh and Herbert, but I think they have a lot they have to fix with the Chargers with their roster.
no, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think Denver and I think Broncos and the Chargers, they're preparing for next year. This year is going to be all figuring out the next step. I don't because I don't think either Sean Payton and and uh and Jim Harbaugh is going to be fired or going to have a terrible season. But I don't think they're quite not ready or quite not good enough to challenge the Chiefs. So I think it's going to
Right.
be again the Chiefs division.
And I guess I think we're assuming that the Raiders are probably just tanking this year. With Gardner Minshew at quarterback, you look at the talent outside of like Devontae Adams. I mean, Brock Bowers, I think, could end up being a really, really good tight end in the NFL. But outside of that, I just think it's going to be really tough.
So should Kansas City Chiefs be worried? They're 0-3 in the preseason.
Yeah, totally. Remember, the 0-16 Lions went 4-0 in the preseason. So
yeah, no, I'm
which
joking.
hey, the Titans did go 3-0 in preseason, but that probably means they're going to have a losing record in the actual season.
Yeah, I know. I'm. I know that Andy Reid is 100% not thinking about this week's game. He's thinking about the next week's game against the Ravens.
Yeah, and I guess when we think about Kansas City, it's not really comparing them against these free teams. It's who are the biggest threats to Kansas City? Like, because Kansas City is going to try to do something this year that hasn't been done before, the free Pete. Something that could elevate Patrick Mahomes into a league of his own. That could completely change narratives. Who stands in Kansas City's way?
I think all the teams that can stop KC is on the AFC, and it's the trio: Baltimore, Buffalo, and maybe Jacksonville.
No. I don't see Jacksonville having any chance. And honestly, Buffalo, I think they've lost a lot. Now, Buffalo, if James Cook can be a workhorse running back, maybe.
Or all the teams that can stop Kansas City are on the AFC North.
Yeah, I think Cincinnati, Baltimore. I'll add San Francisco. I think San Francisco is the one team for the NFC. Now, okay. Detroit / Green Bay might be good enough. but we'll have to wait and see. Right. But I think those two teams have a chance to be good enough. So if I say San Francisco, Green Bay, and Detroit on the NFC, and then Baltimore and Cincinnati over in the AFC, I feel like one of those five teams have the chance, in my opinion. Outside of that, like you can't convince me on Dallas or Philly. I don't see anyone in the AFC South unless Houston just really takes a huge step forward with Stephon Diggs. I still think they're a little too young to take out KC. Um, Outside of that, I don't know. I don't see anyone in the NFC South doing it for sure. But yeah, so I think it's probably one of those five teams that have a shot to prevent KC from a three-peat.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think those are the teams that can stop. But again, think either KC gets booed out in the playoffs at the AFC playoffs, because if they make to the Super Bowl, I think they win again.
Absolutely. Now, I think for KC, what is their biggest internal threat? Like, what could stop? Because maybe if you look at any dynasty, usually it's that they defeat themselves. What could defeat KC? Because to me, I think you look at the receiver situation, and to me, that almost cost them last year.
Yeah, but then they go to the market and get Juju Schuster. So they addressed this issue today.
True. And then obviously they got Xavier Worthy through the draft, who I think he's going to be a fantastic receiver. We're going to have to see how Rashee Rice plays out with his legal issues. But I think he'll miss some of the regular season, but he'll be back for the postseason. Is what I think will happen. I mean, that's just how it works in the NFL. Yeah. So, and as we've seen, Patrick Mahomes can make it work. Now, Travis Kelce. I think last year you began to see the beginning stages of his decline. Is that going to accelerate this year, or is he still going to be super productive? That to me is super interesting. Isaiah Pacheco showed that he could be a bell cow running back last year for KC. Is that going to continue? The defense for KC took a huge step forward and helped them win another Super Bowl. Can they continue to play at a high level? That's all, a lot of things that I think are likely to happen.
And of course, the biggest question, as you pointed out early, but again, that's what KC fans are thinking about, is can they be more effective getting the ball? Because we know how Patrick Mahomes is effective and dynamic quarterback, but can his receivers be as productive and reliable?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I mean, they let Tyreek Hill walk in free agency, and all they've done since is win Super Bowls. And allegedly, according to the NFL 100, Tyreek Hill is the best player in the NFL. Allegedly, which is asinine. But I'm going to say Tyreek Hill has won no Super Bowls without Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes has won 2 without Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. So show who's better than who.
Yeah. Yeah, but obviously, in terms of picking the division, I mean, we're both on KC. KC to win. I don't think any of the other 3 teams have a chance in the wild card.
No.
Chargers maybe have an outside chance if everything hits, but probably not.
Yeah. Since I think AFC North is better, because if you think about it, the other teams outside of the division winner from AFC North and AFC West, the gap is way bigger.
Yeah. So if I had to pick the entire AFC, I definitely think KC is your AFC West. I take Houston to win the AFC South. I'm picking Cincinnati to win the AFC North. And I picked I picked Buffalo to win the AFC East, if I remember correctly. And my wild cards, I'm going to say, are Baltimore, Miami, and Indianapolis.
My playoffs going to be AFC East, Miami, AFC North, Baltimore, AFC South, Houston, AFC West, Kansas City. The playoff, the wild card, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and uh, Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I think the AFC title game will end up being Cincinnati versus Kansas City for the third
Yes,
time in 4 years. But I
yes.
do think KC will come out on top of this one.
No, give me the Bengals. I think Bengals are going to be on top.
So the Bengals to their second Super Bowl in 4 years. I think the KC goes to their third. Now, the NFC West. I don't know if this one's as clear cut because obviously San Francisco made it to the Super Bowl last year. They were the most dominant team in the NFC. However, they lost in a heartbreaker. Sometimes we see teams that lose in heartbreaking Super Bowls. They don't come back the same way. But I kind of feel like San Francisco could buck this trend a little bit.
But how long this Super Bowl window competitive team is going to last? Because I know they have a lot of players in their prime, like George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, but how long they can last?
True, because you look at the salary cap, they're not going to be able to re-sign all these guys after this year, after next year. And then, Brock Purdy has been amazing so far in his young career, but are the physical limitations going to show up eventually for Brock Purdy? Or can he continue to develop and be an effective quarterback?
Yeah, how long? Because for now he's not showing he's a fluke. He's a legit, but can he continue to be as reliable quarterback as he was last year?
This is true. And also, Kyle Shanahan. We say this every postseason. Kyle Shanahan often ends up being his worst known enemy when it comes to play calling, when it comes to out-psyching himself. He's an amazing regular season play caller, an amazing head coach. But it feels like basically he's Andy Reid before Patrick Mahomes. And I don't feel like Brock Purdy is his Patrick Mahomes. Brock Purdy's Alex Smith.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess he'll be finding his success somewhere else because, you know, it feels like Kyle Shanahan is Andy Reid when he was at Philly. Had a lot of, good overall success, but never delivered on the big game.
Absolutely. They tried to have the successor with Trey Lance. And of course, that didn't work with injuries and just development. And, I don't know if you saw that, Gus, the other day where Trey Lance threw 5 interceptions in the preseason game against the Chargers and then had 2 fumbles. He had 7 turnovers in a full game. It's just sad. He threw 350 yards and he had 3 touchdowns, but man, he was just awful. And
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever going to develop into a full-time quarterback.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, he probably did not deliver as a lot of people, especially on the San Francisco 49ers coaching staff believed.
Exactly. Now, who could challenge San Francisco? I think the one team that could is probably the Rams. The Rams were in the wild card last year. Had a tough loss at Detroit. I guess the question is Matthew Stafford on his last legs? Because it feels like he is. I don't think he's going to go much more past this year, maybe 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think his kind of like good years of his career are almost done. So he knows that he has to win now. Definitely, I think it's going to both. I think both Rams and the 49ers are going to go to the playoffs. The question is,
easy.
Who's going to win the division? I still think the 49ers are going to win, but it's going to be not as not as comfortable like last year.
I think it'll come down, because the 49ers have just as talented of an offense. Kyron Williams, one of the best running backs in the league. He had an amazing season last year as long as he can stay healthy. Blake Corum, they drafted him from Michigan. I think it's going to be a solid RB2 for the Rams. I think that's going to be a solid 1-2 punch. We know how much. Why am I blanking on the Rams HC? Sean McVay. You know how much he likes to rotate players in and out. Of course, receiver, we saw what they did with Puka Nacua. They still got Cooper Kupp. I mean, they're loaded. And defensively, they're still kind of reeling from not having Aaron Donald anymore. But I think, they're starting to find their groove without him. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think Niners win a division. Rams are the wild card. Now, obviously, Seahawks, Cardinals, I don't expect either one of those two to make the playoffs. I think Geno Smith, it's been a fun story, but I think it's starting to kind of wear off a bit in Seattle. He's just an average quarterback at best. Of course, they still got DK Metcalf. They got Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, I mean, they've got some talented players up there in Seattle. Jamal Adams, they're not inspiring. But I do like the coach they got. They got McDonald from the Ravens last year.
And it's funny about Seattle because think about how they're gonna go to this season without Pete Carroll.
Right, but you can still say this: they still won the Russell Wilson trade for sure.
Yeah,
and they're going to be benefiting massively for years.
It's so funny how Pete Carroll kind of won the divorce against Russell Wilson, but not like Brady and Belichick, where Brady won the Super Bowl and was so dominant. It was like he was less bad, and then now only Russell is still in the league, as Pete Carroll was not the head coach anymore in Seattle.
Right. And it does almost feel a little bit like do or die for Geno Smith too. Like if he has a bad year, does Seattle finally move on from him? But like, who would they move on to is the question. I feel like Seattle's in purgatory. They're kind of like they're kind of like the Steelers of the NFC, which is ironic because that's where Russell Wilson is now. If they're not bad enough to be a top picking at the top of the NFL draft, they're not good enough to compete for championships. And that's just Seattle football right now.
Yeah.
Now, Cardinals have been really bad. However, I will say this. I do have a little bit of optimism for them. Because Kyler Murray's finally healthy. He is back. And I think this is definitely do or die for Kyler Murray. Otherwise, the Cardinals may have to move on from him. Now, he does get Marvin Harrison Jr. Huge upgrade at receiver. Trey McBride took a huge step forward as a tight end for the Cardinals. You have James Conner in the backfield still. He's not near as good as where he was in Pittsburgh. Trey Benson, an exciting rookie running back from Florida State. I'm excited to watch for the Cardinals. They got some young guys like Kenneth Murray on defense, so they're going to be exciting too. But I'll say this. Kyler Murray is the one reason I'm very interested in Arizona. Because I still think Kyler Murray at his best is a top 15 quarterback in the league. Because he could do certain things with his legs, extending plays, mobility that few other quarterbacks can. But the problem is he's just grown so injury prone. And then he's inconsistent. There's questions about does he study like an NFL quarterback should? And, he's got to prove he can play well.
Yeah. Kyler Murray definitely had a really interesting start, but he's being a shallow of himself, and he is not as committed as people wanted to, especially in Arizona.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think I'm on the Niners winning the division. I think Rams make a wild card. I still think that the Seahawks are a fringe wild card team, but I just don't think they're good enough to 100% get it. And if I had to pick my NFC, I think I took the Bucks. I took the Bucks to win the NFC South. I took the Cowboys to win the NFC East. I took the Packers to win the NFC North. I'm taking the Niners to win the West. And then in terms of wildcard teams, I think the Eagles, I like the Falcons to be a wild card team, and I like the Lions to be a wild card team. Bears right on the fringe of that with the Seahawks.
Yeah, yeah. My NFC picks are Eagles, Lions, Falcons, 49ers in terms of playoffs, wild card, Rams, Bucks, and Green Bay.
And who do you think makes the Super Bowl? So, um, from the NFC? I'm going to go Green Bay. I really think that the way that the Packers played the second half of last year and in the playoffs, it's a sign to me that's a team that's about to break open. I think Jordan Love's going to take a huge step forward this year. I think his receiving core is going to take a huge step forward this year. I really like Green Bay. I like the direction they're going in. Give me the Packers.
Mm, I'm gonna go NFC North, but I'm gonna go Detroit. I think the way Detroit is progressing, getting better every year, I think they finally makes to the Super Bowl. Give me the Lions.
Dude, you have such an amazing Super Bowl. Cincinnati and Detroit would be an unreal Super Bowl. That'd be such a fun game. Who do you think wins the Bengals and the Lions?
It's gonna be very much middle of America kind of tough game, but I think it's gonna be Cincinnati.
So for me, I've got very much the antithetical of. I mean, it's still mid America, but like you have Chiefs and Packers, which are much more bigger brands, I would say. Um, but I think the free peat happens. I just it feels like this is the dynasty that's going to do it. I like Kansas City to go in a free peat.
So we're both picking the AFC to win the Super Bowl.
Yes. Who do you think is going to be MVP?
Um,
I'm going to
you
go
go
on a list.
first.
I like Jordan Love.
I'm gonna go Lamar Jackson.
All right, so you go Lamar Jackson, go back to back. I'm going with Jordan Love to win the MVP for the NFL. Yeah. And of course, it all starts next Thursday with the Ravens at the Chiefs. One big piece of NFL news here. CeeDee Lamb finally signed an extension with the Cowboys. Huge for Dallas. It would have been asinine for Jerry Jones to let him walk. And I'm glad he came to his senses.
That's true. I think both one needed the other. CeeDee Lamb definitely knows that he is more valuable at the Cowboys, and the Cowboys definitely needed CeeDee Lamb. So finally, the soap opera is over.
Absolutely. And I guess on a sadder personal note, Malik Willis got traded away to the Packers. I hate that didn't work because I really wanted him to work for the Titans, but he just got through. He got thrown into an awful situation and never developed. And maybe he can develop into a decent backup in Green Bay.
Yeah, maybe a fresh start. Backing up Jordan Love. So I think it's a good opportunity for him.
Absolutely. Real quick, I do want to just bring up baseball real quick. Of course, we only have a few weeks left until the playoffs in baseball. First, we want to shout out to the Chicago White Sox. They first team to 100 losses this year, 31 and 101. Please sell the team, Jerry. Sell the team. It's atrocious. They're 41 and a half games back of the wild card. Is how bad Chicago is. But obviously, in terms of being the Braves are holding on for dear life right now. Only 3 games ahead of the Mets for the last wild card spot. But it feels like the Braves are 7-3 in the last 10. They're kind of turning things around a little bit. And I just have to wonder, the last time the Braves were not the division champion, heading to the playoffs, they won the whole thing. So I'd rather them be the wild card. Yeah, they won today 10-6 over Minnesota. So I'd rather them be the wild card.
But this wild card fight is going to be insane in the National League. I think, if you look around, you see Diamondbacks and Padres are leading the fight, but I don't count my Mets out or Giants or even the Cubs or even the Cardinals.
Right.
So you
And we
have
still have a whole Mets Brave series to go at the end of September.
yeah. So I think that series is gonna determine one spot, but it's three picks now, right? The wild card.
Yeah. And of course, the Braves do go to the Phillies this weekend for a 4-game set. And they're only 6.5 back of Philadelphia. So if they win that series, it's on for the NL East too. Um, so yeah, I mean it's going to be truly, truly fascinating to say the least in the NL. And then
But
over in the AL, Baltimore only 2 games back of the Yankees. Are the Yankees going to give away the AL East?
I don't think so. I think the Yanks hold the division. But what about Kansas City Royals? They were on the bottom of the MLB for quite some time, and now they seem to be back.
Right. I mean, what a battle for the AL Central. The Guardians, the Royals, and the Twins all within 2.5 games. Of course, the Twins lost today. And hey, the Tigers are 500. I mean, that feels like it's been a long time since they've had a winning record, it feels like.
And it's so funny how over the AL East, uh, two teams that not not long ago were like the title contenders falling apart. Tampa Bay and Toronto.
Yeah, and the Red Sox aren't that good either. But, I mean, they're just okay. And then the AL West is just a disaster. I mean, Houston's lucky they're in a bad division. Because
Yeah,
that division is awful. I mean, Seattle's barely above 500. The Rangers, after winning the World Series last year, just
like, they're on the hangover title.
yeah. But hey, Oakland, shout out Oakland. I mean, they could have like been the Chicago White Sox this year and floated up their temp, but they are fighting. They're 5-5 in their last 10, 56-75, and they're not last. So shout out to them. Of course, Milwaukee, they lead the NL Central by 10 games. They should win it. But hey, the NL West, though, that's going to be a tight game because the Dodgers, with as talented as they are only up 3 games in the Diamondbacks and 4 in the Padres. If the Yankees or Dodgers lose their divisions, either one of those managers should be fired.
Especially in LA, because the amount of talent Dave Roberts has is insane.
Yeah, and the idea of losing either one of those divisions is crazy. So we'll be continue to see what happens for the rest of the season in MLB as we get closer to October. The last thing I want to mention is some NASCAR because we went to Daytona this week and we had a huge upset winner in Harrison Burton. And by the way, I just want to say shout out Lee Diffie. Lee Diffie is now going to be the full-time NASCAR commentator for NBC, and he was awesome. I love him so much. He had an iconic call. You should look it up. The final lap of the NASCAR race this week. It was awesome. And what was cool is that Harrison Burton's father, Jeff Burton, is a commentator for NBC. So he kind of got to call his own son winning the race, which was awesome. What's not awesome is Harrison Burton does get a playoff spot now because he won a race. But Harrison Burton was 34th in playoff standings. I don't know if you saw the urinating tree video, Gus, of him kind of complaining about how it's stupid that you can win one race and you're in the playoffs in NASCAR. Because, I mean, once again, you shouldn't have playoffs in NASCAR or any sort of racing series. It's dumb. But that race was cool. That race overall was awesome. There were some scary wrecks. We had 2 cars flip over in this race. NASCAR's got to find a way to get these cars to stay on the ground. 3 flips in the last 2 races is a lot. Now, I don't think there'll be any flips this week at Darlington and the Southern 500, one of the crown jewels. Should be a really entertaining race. It was the last race of the regular season. When I look at the postseason right now, Chris Buescher is the last driver in the playoffs based on points. And I don't see there being a new winner at Darlington. I think Chris Buescher is going to win that last playoff spot to get himself in. I think Martin Truex Jr. and Ty Gibbs will be able to get themselves in on points as well. Um, I don't now. Ross Chastain's the one guy. Ross Chastain and Kyle Busch are the two guys that could potentially win their way in. But at the end of the day, if Chastain or Busch don't win, Chris Buescher will find himself in the playoffs. And Bubba's never really been great at Darlington, but he needs to find some magic now to get in. So, going to be an exciting end of the regular season in NASCAR. But let's go over to some Brazilian sports. I mean, right now you're in the Rio Branco off season, but I still see you're down there calling some soccer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course, the Paulista Cup's happening. I'm kind of tuned off because when your team is eliminated, you don't want to think about the competition they were eliminated to. So I'm gonna focus more on the big stuff. Definitely exciting title fight in the Brazilian Championship when we have a new first place. Fortaleza came out of nowhere, beat Corinthians now on the top spot after Botafogo tied 0-0 on the road. Fortaleza won their last 5 games. Uh, they last year they won the runner-ups in the Sul-Americana. Can this be the year that a Northeast team wins the Brazilian Championship? Because I believe the last time a team from the Northeast won the Brazilian Championship was in 1988 with Bahia. So
So they're
can this
basically like the Big Ten, basically.
um the Northeast is kind of, I'll go even deeper. I think they are, I won't say the Big Ten because they haven't won in a long time. So yeah, I mean they have the crowds, they have the history. I go more with the Big 12, right? The Big 12 currently with the teams they have right now.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So I don't think Fortaleza can sustain that long because I mean Palmeiras right now they're out of Libertadores and Libertadores and Brazilian Cup, so they're only focused on the Brazilian Championship, and definitely they're a threat. They won 5-0 against Cuiabá. Flamengo won also against Bragantino, and so the top four is interesting. I think it's going to be an interesting fight. This midweek we have Brazilian Cup first leg games in the quarterfinals. A lot of interesting matchups. Of course, I think the more interesting matchup is São Paulo versus Atlético Mineiro. Both teams that really need to turn the season up, especially Atlético Mineiro, Vasco and Atlético Paranaense. They play today for the Brazilian Championship, and they're gonna play again on Thursday for the Brazilian Cup. And Bahia and Flamengo, I think this the more kind of the rich the teams with the a lot of money. Flamengo has the largest budget. Bahia with Man City backing, and of course, I think the weakest matchup is Juventude versus Corinthians. But Corinthians has been really good in the cups, in the Sul-American and Brazilian Cup. But in the Brazilian Championship, they're still in the relegation zone. They are the 18th place, you know. So if I was Corinthians, I would have think about, you know, not on purpose, but maybe playing with the reserves in the Cubs and really focusing on not being relegated. That's I
Yeah,
think the first priority of Corinthians is not to be relegated.
right. Because I mean, a team of that stature getting relegated is just it'd be devastating. So
Oh,
don't
oh
worry about
yeah,
the Cups. Screw the Cups.
yeah. And last but not least, Hendrick scoring at his Real Madrid debut. I mean, and a weekend that the game that everybody's talking about, Kylian Mbappe, Hendrick came out of the bench and scored in his Real Madrid debut. So this kid I mean, he's going to be the face of Brazilian soccer. I think I was thinking about 4 years, but I think it's going to be in 2 years. I think he's going to be in the World Cup in America.
I mean, he's going to become a superstar at the end of that, by the end of that World Cup. Because I mean, think about this: the World Cup in America, there's so many soccer players who are gonna have a chance to become a huge star, and Endrick is certainly one of them.
Oh yeah, I think he's going to be one of the wonder kids of this World Cup. Along with Pulisic but I think Hendrick is going to be a player to look up, to be on the lookout. And it's so crazy that like 2 years ago in this podcast we were talking about him on the Copinha, and he's now playing at Real Madrid.
I mean, it's just insane, and you just really haven't seen any Americans come up like that. But hey, he's a generational talent, and I'm excited to see him continue to grow.
Yeah, me too. He's our hope for 2026, I believe.
Absolutely, and it's great to see all the European leagues back in session too, with the our Europe and Spain and our England and
Y-
Spain and all that. So
Yeah, the European leagues are back. That's true.
absolutely, but I think it's all that we have for tonight. And obviously, very exciting news. Of course, when we come back next time, we'll have a lot of football to talk about. So we talked a lot of football, but we'll have actual games to react to. Um, and we'll be right in the full swing of things. Because honestly, the summer normally is slow, but it didn't really feel like the summer was slow at all. And of course, mostly I think that's due to Tony Vitello's in the falls going such a national championship run. We didn't really have any downtime at all in sports. There was always something going on. Of course, we had the soccer tournaments or Copa America going on. But it's time to start a cycle all brand new again.
Yeah, yeah. Can't wait for a Saturday and Sunday college football weekend. It's gonna be fun.
Absolutely. But for Gus Tomazeli down in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, I am Nick Hill in Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States, and you've listened to the only Brazilian American sports podcast. 2 countries, 2 Americas, all sports. Have a great Tuesday morning.